She had a PhD from one of Germany's top universities, a master's from Oxford, and a corporate career at McKinsey. She stood on stages in front of thousands wearing diamonds, collected $4 billion from over 4 million people across 175 countries by selling them a cryptocurrency that never actually existed. Then one morning, she boarded a budget Ryanair flight, and the most wanted woman in FBI history ceased to exist. There's a particular kind of dangerous that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't look dangerous. It sounds educated. It carries credentials. It shakes your hand and makes you feel like the lucky one for being in the room. Ruja Ignatova had that quality from the time she was a teenager. She was born in 1980 in Rus, a mid-sized Bulgarian city near the Romanian border. Her father was an engineer. Her mother ran a nursery school. They weren't wealthy, but they were driven, the kind of family that treated education like the only real asset worth having. When the Iron Curtain fell and Eastern Europe cracked open in the early 1990s, the Ignatovs packed up and moved to Schramberg, a small town in southwestern Germany. Ruja was 10 years old. She didn't speak a word of German. 4 years later, she was skipping grades. Her teachers remembered her as the sharpest student they'd ever worked with. One described her as the best he'd taught in his entire career. Her classmates remembered something else. In her school yearbook, she wrote something that, looking back, feels like a preview. Maybe I did take pleasure in tormenting some students. I was always looking for the chance to spread new amusing stories about them. She was a teenager writing that about herself. Most kids claim to be misunderstood. Ruja admitted cheerfully that she enjoyed having power over people. She earned a scholarship to the University of Konstanz at 18. By 2005, at just 25 years old, she had a PhD in private international law. Then came a master's in European law at Oxford. Then a consulting position at McKinsey & Company in Sofia, Bulgaria. By any measure, this was a woman who had already made it before 30. And that's exactly what made what happened next so effective. Because when Ruja started talking to people about money, about investment, about the future of finance, they didn't hear a pitch. They heard someone who clearly knew things they didn't. Someone with the kind of paper trail that makes you lower your guard before you've even asked a question. But the paper trail had a footnote most people missed. In 2012, quietly, without much press, Ruja was convicted of fraud in Germany. The case involved her father's acquisition of a company that declared bankruptcy under suspicious circumstances shortly after the purchase. She received a suspended sentence. 14 months, suspended, no prison time, and crucially, no public scandal. The conviction sat in court records while her reputation remained spotless everywhere that mattered. Then in 2013, she surfaced in a scheme called Bitcoin. It was a multi-level marketing cryptocurrency operation based in Hong Kong. The usual playbook. We're the next Bitcoin. Get in early. It collapsed. Ruja moved on. At this point, the FBI's Financial Intelligence Division, along with regulators in several European countries, were beginning to pick up signals, unusual wire transfer patterns, complaints from early investors in Eastern Europe, reports filtering through from Germany and the UK about aggressive cryptocurrency sales tactics that didn't match anything legitimate in the market. Nobody had a name yet. Nobody had a face. They were about to get both. Because by 2014, Ruja Ignatova had stopped rehearsing. She was ready for the real thing, and she was going to call it OneCoin. Sold-out arenas, thousands of people standing, cheering, phones in the air, and walking onto that stage, not a musician, not a celebrity. A woman in a designer gown covered in diamonds, speaking into a microphone like she'd been doing it her whole life. That was Ruja's method. She didn't sell OneCoin from a website or a cold email. She sold it from stages. Big ones. London, Lisbon, Dubai, Macau. She'd stand in front of thousands of investors and deliver the same line with complete conviction. OneCoin is not just the next Bitcoin, it's bigger than Bitcoin. And the crowd would roar. To understand why it worked, you need to understand what 2014 felt like for ordinary people watching cryptocurrency from a distance. Bitcoin had gone from being worth almost nothing to turning early investors into millionaires almost overnight. Everyone wanted the next one. Everyone was terrified of missing it again. That fear that specific nagging fear of being left behind, was the exact gap Ruja walked into. OneCoin was marketed as simple, safe, and already growing. No complicated wallets, no confusing technology, no waiting around. You bought a package, your coins accumulated, and the value kept climbing. Ruja's team showed investors dashboards, graphs, rising numbers. It looked exactly like what legitimate crypto investment looks like, except none of it was real. The FBI and European financial regulators had already started receiving complaints by 2015. Investors in Germany, the UK, Uganda, Pakistan, and across Southeast Asia reporting that they couldn't withdraw funds, that customer support had gone silent, that the numbers on their dashboards never translated into actual money. The complaints kept coming, thousands of them, and they kept pointing back to the same company. Here's what investigators slowly pieced together. OneCoin had no real blockchain. Every legitimate cryptocurrency runs on a public, decentralized blockchain, a shared record that anyone can verify. OneCoin claimed to have a private one. FBI Special Agent Ronald Shimko, who worked the case out of the New York field office, later said it plainly. Investors were simply asked to trust OneCoin. There was nothing to independently verify. The coins weren't mined the way real crypto is mined. The value wasn't determined by any market. It was a number Ruja's company chose, displayed on a screen, and told people was real. The MLM structure made it spread fast. Investors didn't just buy in. They were encouraged to recruit family members, friends, colleagues. Every new recruit meant commission for the person above them. This is how OneCoin reached over 175 countries. Not through advertising, through personal trust. A cousin in Bulgaria told a cousin in Uganda. A church member in South Korea told her congregation. By the time most people realized something was wrong, they had already pulled others in with them. By 2017, the FBI's case was being built in the Southern District of New York, one of the most powerful federal prosecution offices in the United States. Victim testimonies were piling up. Financial forensics teams were tracing wire transfers across dozens of countries. The scale of what they were uncovering was staggering. Over $4 billion collected, millions of victims. A fraud operation running simultaneously across every continent except Antarctica. On October 12, 2017, a federal grand jury signed the indictment. An arrest warrant was issued for Ruja Ignatova. She was gone 13 days later. October 25, 2017. 13 days after the FBI's arrest warrant was signed, Ruja Ignatova was supposed to be in Lisbon, Portugal. There was an event scheduled, a big one. Thousands of OneCoin investors waiting in an auditorium, expecting their leader to walk out and fire them up the way she always did. She never got on that flight. Instead, that morning, she showed up at Sofia Airport in Bulgaria and boarded a Ryanair flight to Athens, Greece. A budget airline, a short hop. Nothing about it looked like the movement of a woman who had been living in penthouses and flying private. That was deliberate. She had been tipped off. Investigators believe someone with knowledge of the indictment warned her before authorities could move. She didn't panic and run. She walked out calmly, carry-on in hand, and disappeared into the most controlled exit of her entire life. The flight landed in Athens. Ruja stepped off, and that was it. No confirmed sightings after the airport. No card transactions. No phone activity. No footage. A woman who had been performing in front of thousands of people just weeks earlier had, in the span of a single afternoon, ceased to exist in any traceable way. Back in Sofia, the people closest to her were left scrambling. Her brother Constantine, who she had quietly been grooming to take over operations, suddenly found himself running a multi-billion-dollar fraud with no instructions, no contact from his sister, and investigators closing in from every direction. He kept OneCoin running. He kept attending events, kept the machine going, told investors everything was fine. He was essentially holding a grenade with the pin already pulled. In March 2019, Konstantin Ignatov was arrested at Los Angeles International Airport. He was boarding a flight when federal agents stopped him. Within months, he pleaded guilty to fraud and money laundering charges. To reduce his sentence, he cooperated fully with the FBI, giving investigators detailed information about OneCoin's internal operations, the money flows, and what he knew about his sister's escape. He served 34 months and was released in early 2024. One by one, the people around Ruja were falling. Carl Sebastian Greenwood, her co-founder, was eventually arrested and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Lawyer Mark Scott, who had laundered over $400 million in OneCoin funds through fake investment funds, was convicted and handed a 10-year sentence. Her ex-boyfriend Gilbert Armenta received 5 years. The FBI wasn't slowing down either. Agents were interviewing victims across multiple continents. Financial forensics teams were pulling apart shell companies, tracing wire transfers through Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and offshore accounts in the Caribbean. The Southern District of New York was building one of the most complex international fraud cases in history, but none of it mattered if they couldn't find her. In February 2018, a superseding indictment was issued, adding securities fraud charges on top of the original wire fraud and money laundering counts. The FBI was sending a message. This wasn't going away. The charges were getting heavier, not lighter. What the FBI did know was this. She likely hadn't gone far immediately after Athens. She had connections, deep ones. Bulgaria had organized crime networks with the reach and resources to move someone across borders quietly. She reportedly held multiple passports. She had hundreds of millions of dollars she had moved into private accounts well before she disappeared. Someone helped her vanish this completely. The question was who? And that answer would lead investigators somewhere nobody initially expected. The FBI had her name on one of the most serious federal indictments in white-collar crime history. They had her face. They had her financial trail. They had her brother cooperating from inside a prison cell, telling them everything he knew. And they still couldn't find her. In June 2022, nearly 5 years after she vanished in Athens, the FBI made it official. Ruja Ignatova was added to the 10 most wanted fugitives list. Only the 11th woman in the program's entire 72-year history to receive that designation. The initial reward was $250,000. Agents publicly stated they were operating under the assumption she was still alive. That assumption was about to get complicated. In 2023, Bulgarian investigative journalists published a report that stopped the case cold. A police informant had overheard a conversation at a gathering after a few drinks, where the brother-in-law of a notorious Bulgarian drug lord known as Taki made a claim. He said Ruja had been killed in November 2018, that she had been taken out on a yacht in the Ionian Sea and disposed of. The alleged motive was straightforward. Taki had been involved in sheltering her after her disappearance, and eliminating her meant eliminating the only person who could connect him to OneCoin. It was a dark theory, and for a while, it gained traction. But investigators started pulling at the threads. The man allegedly hired to carry out the act was, according to Dutch prison records, sitting in a cell in the Netherlands at the exact time the murder was supposed to have happened. The German State Criminal Police Office looked at the timeline and said flatly, "It doesn't add up." They weren't abandoning the investigation. They were doubling down on it. Their official position remained that Ruja Ignatova was alive. Then in June 2024, the reward jumped from $250,000 to $5 million. That's not a routine update. Authorities raise rewards that high when they believe someone is close, when they need pressure applied in a specific direction, when they think the right person just needs the right incentive to talk. The U.S. Department of State authorized the increase through its Transnational Organized Crime Rewards program, the same program used to pursue cartel leaders and international arms traffickers. They were treating her like one of them. That same year, a UK court issued a worldwide freeze on all assets linked to Ignatova and her associates. 2 luxury London properties, a Kensington penthouse and a smaller apartment, had already been tracked down and sold for a combined £11.4 million. Both had been hidden inside shell companies registered in Guernsey. By November 2025, German prosecutors were moving to have those funds transferred to compensate victims. Meanwhile, the sighting reports kept coming in from different directions. German investigators quietly turned their attention toward Cape Town, South Africa. A documentary filmmaker named Johan von Meerbach, who had spent years following the case, reported that security sources in South Africa had spotted her in an affluent neighborhood of the city in the company of Bulgarian nationals. Around the same time, BBC journalists investigating Kremlin connections noted that her former security advisor had links to Russian intelligence networks, and had himself managed to vanish from French house arrest while awaiting extradition to the United States. Russia, South Africa, Dubai. 3 different leads, 3 different continents, and not one confirmed photograph since 2017. What we know for certain is this: over 4 million people lost money. Families in Uganda sold land. Pensioners in Germany emptied savings accounts. A woman in the UK lost £30,000 she had spent years putting aside. Most of them have recovered nothing. The court proceedings grind forward. The asset seizures chip away at the edges. But the center of it all, the person who designed it, performed it, and profited most from it, remains somewhere out there beyond the reach of every warrant, every reward, every surveillance system pointed in her direction. The FBI lists her as wanted. German prosecutors have charged her. Interpol has a red notice active in her name. And as of today, Ruja Ignatova is still free, 8 years on the run, $5 million on her head, and not a single confirmed trace. Whether she is living quietly under a new identity in a city nobody has checked yet, or whether she genuinely no longer exists, the answer to that question is known by very few people. None of them are talking, and until one of them does, the most wanted woman in FBI history remains exactly where she wants to be: invisible.